Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our 5-week webinar series on supporting bereaved children, our group for parents and caregivers. We are on week or webinar number 3, and today we're going to be talking about mourning rituals and continuing bonds. So typically, we'll get into kind of where this would fall with the kids group, but this usually falls on week 3 of our children and youth group, which is Memories Week, which is also it's always a really, really fun week and the week that kids really look forward to. We'll get into that in a little bit. So my name is Orly Culverhouse, and I am the Caring Hearts Children's Program Coordinator and Music Therapist at the Hospice.
And hello, everybody. My name is Kayla Slaggers, and I am the Supportive Services Coordinator at St. Joseph's Hospice.
So our agenda for today, we'll kind of go through our housekeeping like we always do. We're going to be talking about mourning. We're going to talk about rituals. We'll talk about how we can approach things like milestones and holidays. That can be a huge source of anxiety for families. We'll talk about something called continuing bonds. That might be a bit of a new term if this is your first group with us. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll always end with our teachable moments. So that's kind of the ways that we can continue the theme of this webinar this week, and how you can continue this work with your kids outside of group. So our housekeeping. So we're on, webinar 3 of our 5-part series. Each week has a different theme, so you probably don't actually need to watch them in chronological order, but this is the 3rd one that we've recorded so far. Typically, we would be offering this parent/caregiver group at the same time as our ages 6 to 9 group or our ages 10 to 13 group at the hospice. But right now we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of us are working from home. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to record the material for people, just so that we can support parents and caregivers virtually, but also we're hoping that we'll be able to use this as a resource in the future for busy parents and caregivers, because not everybody can come to a group at the same time as their child. So this is going to be for maybe you're at home during the pandemic and you're watching this, but maybe you are taking your kid to group or having someone else bring them to group, and it's just not really an option for you to be able to come, and so you can get all of the same material that we would cover in the in-person group just online. So that's kind of our structure of the group. We will be, if you receive this webinar via email, then we might have extra resources, links to articles, that kind of thing attached to the email. And if you have stumbled upon this on our YouTube channel, then you can email us at supportiveservices@sjhospice.ca to request the slides to these modules, as well as the resources, as well as if you just have any questions, comments, feedback, anything like that. We welcome questions and conversations about children's grief and bereavement. So we will, just after I said you don't actually need to watch these all in chronological order, if you have watched our very first webinar, which was focusing more on Grief 101, you'll remember that we talked about the difference between grief and mourning. So remember that grief is this natural response to loss, and it is all of our inner experiences, whether they be physical, emotional, intellectual, and so on. And we know that grief is much more than just a feeling. That is one of the myths that's out there about grief. But really, grief is that kind of internal response to loss, whereas mourning is how we express or externalize our grief. So just that's kind of setting the stage for the rest of our material for today.
Thank you, Orly, for doing a recap of grief and mourning. So we're going to talk more specifically about mourning today in this webinar. So as Orly mentioned, mourning is our expression of how we engage or participate in mourning practices. So mourning is often linked to our culture or our religion, or sometimes our family traditions. Not always, but often we may practice similar mourning strategies that we practice growing up. So society can also play a large role in our mourning practices. And sometimes society, encourages and supports and honors ways that we grieve. But sometimes there can also be another myth. Sometimes there's also misconceptions about the way that we mourn. So in some of the pictures here on the right, you'll notice that these are some traditional ways of mourning that different religious or groups around the world tend to mourn. So in the top picture, this is a picture of members, part of the Jewish faith, and they are participating in Shiva. So they stay in the home together as a family unit. I think it's for about 7 days after a loved one has died. And so this is definitely a religious view and a way that they engage in mourning after someone has died. The middle picture is from, I think, Europe in about the 1800s. And so traditionally, anyone that has lost someone or that has died in the family may wear black for, I think it goes up to 2 years after the member has died. And if you are a widow, so if you have lost a spouse, they actually used to wear black for the rest of their lives. So it just goes to show some, traditional ways that different groups participate in mourning, and this may be true still for some groups. And then the bottom picture is a more recent tradition. So this is a group of it looks like teen, adolescent boys that are participating in a Haka dance, and they are honoring everyone that had died in a mosque shooting. So just another way of honoring people that have died. And so this also, these are different forms of rituals as well. So, either patterns or traditions that people come to that bring them comfort. They connect to other people that have common beliefs or values in honoring someone that has died and staying connected to them too. So mourning is a very essential part of the grieving process. It's a way to integrate our loss into our lives, and it really incorporates our full being in a natural and normal way, just like grief, of having a part or taking up active role in our grief, and really expressing that outwardly and being incorporating our person that has died. So it takes a lot of courage to also be open to mourning practices, whether that be on our own, with our family, within our society, our religious group, or our cultural group. It's not easy sometimes to be vulnerable and to really express what we're feeling on the inside. So mourning also helps us to, like I said, stay connected with people that have died. So we really encourage us to actively, or you to actively engage in your mourning practices. It's a really healthy way of expressing that grief outward. So, Orly, do you want to click to the next slide for me?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So next I want to talk about ways that you can mourn together, either as a family unit or with your children. You could be as just your immediate family, your extended family, maybe it's incorporating people in the community or friends. So we really want to encourage you also to model the behavior that you want to see, that you want to incorporate into your family and your traditions. So modeling may include, showing your feelings, crying with your children, also letting them know if you're feeling angry at the same time. There's many different outlets of expression that you can express your grief and mourn. So maybe it's incorporating dance or music or art. It could be cooking. It's so helpful to mourn in ways that are meaningful to you and your family, or ways to your kids. So you can be so creative in ways that you mourn. So some examples may be displaying or creating memory boxes together. This may be something that you maybe display in your house somewhere, or maybe you each have your own memory boxes. You could create an altar somewhere in your house, or sometimes people like to have an altar in their garden or in a special place. So this may include objects, symbolic objects. It may include pictures, flowers, whatever is meaningful to you to bring together, either your family and friends, or just bring together that connection between the person that has died. Remembering together is also another way of mourning. So this may include looking at pictures, videos, making a scrapbook, and just talking about those memories too is such an important piece of mourning. So naturally we do engage in a lot of mourning practices, but not always. Some people are more closed off to, engaging in mourning as a family, or just, their own individual views and ways of mourning. So, but it's really healthy to encourage your children and let them know that it's okay. And then this is a comforting way to express that tough stuff that can be on the inside and what we're feeling. So, and as we know with child development, if you did attend the last session with us, engaging in expression such as dance, music, art, play are ways that children can express what's going on the inside and help them learn. So mourning is really important for all ages. And with children, another great way to include them is to help them or allow them to participate in that planning and being creative in ways that you can stay connected to your person. So maybe it's planning, the person that has died, a birthday celebration or a holiday together. So what can we do together, or what can you guys do to honor the person who has died? Maybe it's making their favorite meal. Maybe it's setting at the table, setting up a place for them. Maybe it's creating cards, writing letters or stories. There's so many different ways. Maybe it's wearing a piece of clothing, or releasing balloons or butterflies in the sky on their birthday or a special holiday. So whatever seems meaningful, whatever is meaningful to you or your children, you can get as creative as you'd like. So.
Great. One of the ways that we can mourn or a mourning practice is by engaging in rituals. So there's a lot of kind of interchangeable language, I think, throughout today's webinar. Continuing bonds, rituals, mourning, they're all very much related. So one of the ways that we can practice mourning is through rituals. And Kayla mentioned a bunch of different options, and really the options are really limitless. And they're also very important, especially when we are dealing with grieving children and youth. And so why are rituals important? So rituals give us something to do or be a part of in order to honor the person who has died. We talked in our first week kind of about different grieving styles. Some people grieve by doing, or kind of are a little bit more intellectually, and then other people grieve by, more of those feelings, expression, that kind of thing. So rituals really help for those people who grieve by doing, ways that they can engage in some sort of activity that honors the person who has died. They offer a sense of comfort and certainty in a time of distress and uncertainty. And so that's why it's really important, I think, for us to include children and youth when we're planning or talking about rituals or ways to mourn or to honor the person who has died, because it gives children, I think, a sense of control in what is otherwise a very uncontrollable situation. And it gives, if I can control something and I can plan something and be a part of it, then there is some comfort and some certainty in what is otherwise a very uncertain situation. For some people, rituals connect them or you to a sense of something outside of yourself. So this might be, it depends on what your spiritual religious practices are. For some people, rituals are very much connected to religion. So we think of things like weddings, going to church, that kind of thing. Those are absolutely rituals, but they don't have to be linked to religion. It could be spiritual practices, perhaps. And so it really depends on what works best for your family and what resonates with you and your family. But for a lot of people, that comfort can come from being connected to something outside of yourself, whatever that means to you. Rituals can help with meaning making. So one of the things that we talk about, I think, with spirituality in grief and bereavement is how we as human beings make meaning out of our experiences. And that is a really important and integral part of grief and bereavement, is being able to make some sort of meaning out of the experience. And so for some people, rituals can help with that. It's not for everyone, right? But this is why one of the reasons people, I think, find rituals and mourning practices so helpful is that it can help derive meaning from the situation. And again, not with everyone. And they help mark significant events in our lives. So I talked about, weddings, funerals are obviously significant events. And so we, as human beings in society, we think of, there are so many rituals that we use as really like placeholders throughout the lifespan. And so absolutely that should continue after someone has died. Just because, we talked about in earlier weeks, death ends a life, not a relationship. And so we absolutely can continue those rituals after someone has died. And it's healthy and normal and kind of important when we're grieving. And then rituals, kind of the great things about them is that it can be as personal and as unique as we would like. So I had a preteen in a group a few years ago. It was our fall group, and so we were coming upon kind of the holiday season, Christmas time, I think is what this family celebrated. And I had one of my preteens come to group, and she told the group, I know exactly what I'm going to do on Christmas Day. They're like, this is great. What are you going to do? So she said, I'm going to go with my mom to the graveyard where my dad is, and we're going to go sit by his grave and have hot chocolate. And it was that's a ritual that's as personal and unique as the child is, and that was something that she kind of decided and planned and talked with her mom about. And so that's amazing. That's like, so we were really encouraging that child, and so it doesn't have to be, I guess I'm trying to say, it doesn't have to be planning a big huge service, or it can be as simple as I enjoyed a beverage that I used to enjoy with my person at the cemetery. So yeah, so we have an example of a lantern release on this slide. We also have a balloon release, which are very popular right now. Yeah. So we get a lot of questions about, I think from parents and caregivers, about milestones and holidays. I think there's a lot of anxiety that builds up around those big days, whether they're holidays after the person has died, anniversaries, birthdays, the death anniversary. So special days like that can be especially difficult and almost triggering. It brings up a lot of, just a lot of experiences, emotions, whatever, what have you, to the surface for the whole family. And even though these days are extremely difficult and painful, they also offer us a really meaningful opportunity for us as a family to remember the person who has died and to be together, to share memories, and to support each other. So I have on this slide, be comfortable with the idea of regrieving. So we talked about this concept of regrieving in, I think, our last webinar, which is a very, very common, healthy thing that happens with, especially with grieving children and youth. The idea is that children are limited to their developmental stage. Their grief is kind of limited to how much they can understand, which is limited to their development. So if you or I'm assuming you're an adult watching this, if an adult experiences a loss, we have already done all of our development. You're already completely grown. Most of us should understand the implications of what death means. But for a child who is perhaps 5, they might actually not completely understand what the word die even means. And so the way that that child metabolizes that loss, interprets that loss, is going to be very different at age 5, at age 10, at age 15. And so what we find is this idea of regrieving, the child will hit that next developmental stage, wherever that is for them, and understand the death in new terms. And then it's almost like the wound has been reopened and the child is regrieving. So I get a lot of panicked calls from parents to saying, everything was going really well, so-and-so was doing so great, and now it's like taking a huge step back and I don't know what's going on. And but it's totally normal for kids to regrieve. And if we think about it, I think adults also regrieve. If we think of, big milestones throughout our lifetime, how our grief often can be more intense around holidays, anniversaries, that kind of thing. So we experience that as well. It's just a little bit different for kids. And so we would encourage families to use milestones and holidays as an opportunity to engage in mourning and rituals and continuing bonds. And that is so helpful for children and youth as a way to honor the person, but also as a way to, I think, comfort them and comfort our, like, engage in kind of that support as a family as well. We just have some suggestions, gentle suggestions about how to approach milestones and holidays. So I think for a lot of families, it's giving yourself and your family, and maybe especially your children, permission to celebrate. It's okay to be a kid still and have fun. It's okay to still enjoy the holiday season if that's what you celebrate. Acknowledging and having a conversation ahead of time that the holidays are going to be different, whether it's the anniversary, it could be a graduation, it could be a wedding, it might be Christmas time, depending on what you celebrate. But I think it's great with kids to have those conversations ahead of time and to really just acknowledge that it's not going to be the same, right? You can plan ahead, let others know about the decisions that you've made. So for a lot of people, the holidays can kind of bring on their own sense of anxiety and stress. It's, I think, a stressful time at the best of times, and it can be, more challenging than when you're grieving. So it might be making plans ahead that maybe we're going to scale things back a little bit this year, and letting other people know that so that they're aware. Allow for time for emotional expression. I would expect that we're going to see a lot of emotions and behaviors and grief bursts from kids during this time. So just kind of be okay with that. That's really normal. We would expect that during those times, right? And I would expect it for adults too, right? For some people, it's helpful to be able to give back or to volunteer for a cause, or people find meaning that way, not for everyone. Making sure that we are practicing self-care. I find that, and we're going to be talking more about self-care in a coming webinar, but that seems to be the first thing that goes out the window when times get really stressful and we're busy. So just kind of trying to remember that it's really important to take care of ourselves. We talk about you can't pour from an empty cup. And so in order for you to be the best caregiver, the best parent that you can be for your kids and for your family, you need to be taking care of yourself first. And some of the ways that we can take care of ourselves is for asking what you need. Lots of people are usually willing to jump in and help at times like this. So it might be just asking people if it's, I need you to give my kid a ride to an activity or a ride home. Or it would be really helpful if if you're going to the grocery store, let me know and I might give you a few things to grab for me, that kind of thing. It might be about lowering expectations around what the holidays will look like. As much as possible, involving children in decisions where appropriate. I mean, if it's not an option for the whole family to go on a Disney cruise for the holidays, then we're probably not going to give that as an option, but giving kids just a say in what the holidays will look like, how we honor that person, what rituals we're going to engage in, how we're going to choose to mourn is really helpful. For things like traditions, it's a good idea to plan ahead. So you can usually choose to either, maybe it's creating new traditions with your family, or it might be embracing the same traditions that you've had. This is different for every family. I think for some, there's a lot of comfort in doing things the same way that we've always done them. And then for other families, it's important to create new rituals. So you just have to decide what works best for you and your family. Memories is also an important part, I think, of the holiday season or celebrating holidays, like adding or incorporating some form of memorialization and including the person in the celebration. So again, this person has died, but we still have a relationship with them, and it's just different now. So how can we include them and honor our relationship in this new way of celebrating whatever holiday that we're celebrating? Children can make something meaningful specifically for their loved one and decide as a family where it should go. So you could, some options, it might be that they're making, like we said, like picture frames. It could be we've made memorial lanterns, which we'll talk about. And then maybe they're putting it in their bedroom, or they're putting it outside in a special place or somewhere in the home. So yeah, it might be cards, homemade gifts, meals, maybe they're the person's favorite food, lighting a candle, memory books, that kind of thing. So children needs in the holidays. We've mostly talked about all of these points, I think. And we're not just talking about the December holidays, right? We're talking about Mother's Day, Father's Day. anniversaries, graduations, that kind of thing. I think it's just one of the things that we always come back to is just modeling that behavior you want to see. So if we want our kids to be talking to us about their grief and expressing their emotions, we as adults need to also do that, right? And make grief an okay thing to talk about. So the first thing, and hopefully we've kind of laid this foundation throughout this webinar series, is that to talk with kids, talk with your kids about their grief. Talk about, how grief is, any of the feelings or the thoughts or the reactions we have after someone we love dies. And everybody grieves. It's really, really normal. And what does your grief feel like? So that as the holidays kind of approach, you're going to be able to have these conversations or hear from your kids, you know what, my grief feels really worried about Easter coming up or Christmas or what have you. So if you have a language already built up for your kids, then it's going to be a lot easier, I think, to have those conversations. So it's kind of like the base or the grunt work that we're encouraging right now. Planning ahead, we talked about including children as much as possible and planning traditions and honoring loved ones. I often encourage family members to check in often. I think that there's a lot of, the holidays are all often a busy time. And there can be a lot that happens, and just checking in with kids and saying things like, what was that like for you? Was there anything that you liked? Was there anything you didn't like? That kind of thing. And giving them that opportunity to have a conversation with you and to debrief with you about where they're at, right? Expect and accept that there are going to be grief bursts. Like, this is just a given. Accept and expect that there are going to be grief bursts for yourself as well. We would absolutely expect that, and it's very, very normal. If you can find a way to honor and remember the person who has died, that would be great. And remember that grieving children are still children. So they still, they still want to run and jump and laugh and play. And it's still okay to be really excited about the holidays. And we just we want to resist that urge to not let them kind of experience that, right? I think in a previous webinar, we talked about that idea of puddle jumping. So that kids, when they're in their grief, they're experiencing it really intensely, and then they're on to doing the next thing when they're out of the puddle. And so we want to make sure that we aren't constantly dragging them back into that puddle. We want the time outside of the puddle is just as important as the time inside the puddle, if that makes sense.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about a theory called the continuing bonds theory. And I always like to start with this picture. So it's a little girl, and she's looking or talking to a picture of what looks like her dad, it is her dad, and she says, "Good night, Dad, I love you." So this is an example of what continuing bonds may look like. And if you ever find yourself wondering, is this okay for my child? Or if you're doing this and you're wondering, is this okay for me? Is this normal? Are they stuck? Am I stuck? The answer all is yes, it's normal. No, you're not stuck. It's okay. It's healthy. So I just want to start by reassuring you that if you're noticing that your children or yourself are doing such a things as talking to the loved one that has died, or talking to pictures, or we're going to talk about some other examples, these are okay. And just by reassuring ourselves that and talking about these as common practices, it helps us to feel a little bit crazy. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a history and an overview of what this theory is and where it and how it came about. So in 1996, Claes, Silverman, and Nickman shed light on an important bereavement concept in the book Continuing Bonds, New Understandings of Grief. So their work questioned linear models of grief that are supposed to lead to things like acceptance, detachment, and new life, and which view behaviors that promote a continuing bond and with the deceased loved ones as pathological. So these researchers disagreed with this notion, and they suggested a paradigm in which it is normal for the bereaved to continue their bond with the deceased. In their work, they observed many cases in which remaining connected to the deceased provided comfort and support in coping with loss and adjustment. So we just wanted to connect this and tie this to some research out there, and that this is a newer concept, the continuing bonds theory. And like we said, it's kind of on contrary of what these past beliefs used to be, that, you know, detachment and ending that, you know, relationship were healthy and normal. So it kind of switches our lens and gives us some light on reassuring us that it's okay and it's normal. It's actually really a really great thing to continue that bond. I do just want to share though that this, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is for everyone though. So for most people, continuing bonds is a newer, healthier concept that offers a lot of comfort and reassurance to many of us. But for some people, that detachment piece, or, you know, putting a death behind us or starting this new life, sometimes that's healthier for some people. And so if you're having some doubts or questions about what's healthy for you, or if this continued bonds theory doesn't seem natural to you, I encourage you to talk to a professional or talk this through with someone, and just knowing that you're probably still not going crazy if that feels better for you. So just being aware that this newer theory isn't for everyone, but for most. So this continuing bonds theory acknowledges that grief is ongoing. So just like Orly had said, it acknowledges that the grief and the relationship that you had with someone is ongoing. It's forever. That grief never really ends, and it's okay if your relationship with that person continues to evolve and change in different ways. So often people that are bereaved, you know, they hear terms such as just move on or get over it. We like to shift that a little bit to talking about moving forward with our grief, or incorporating our relationship with our person into our lives. So it's more of a process and a journey that we go through, rather than it being a single event and then we're done with it. So it's normal to stay connected with our loved ones, because that grief in your life, this process, it becomes a part of you. Just like that relationship you had with someone, you know, last year or 10 years ago, that's probably still part of your memory, and they're probably still in your heart. And we want to encourage that with kids too, especially as their memories may fade as well. So just reiterating that piece. And continuing bonds also helps us to understand and kind of relate to some of these grief-related behaviors that we may see in our kids. So your child may be wanting to hold on to special objects that remind them of their special person that has died, or maybe wearing clothes, or snuggling with a piece of clothing, or talking to their loved one. So these are all like natural responses that just continue that bond naturally, and that kind of helps us to explain why these things happen. And it's all part of this research that has gone into the continuing bonds theory. So over time too, right now, some of these continuing bonds and these practices in our grief after the loss may seem really heavy, and it may be really difficult to comprehend and integrate into our lives at first. But over time, you may notice that some of these practices in our grief become more peaceful, and they become more of a positive presence in our lives, incorporating those memories. And may not, as Orly talked about, those triggers and those regrieving over time, some of these might lessen and just be a little bit more easier for us to incorporate. But not to say that some of those may still be very triggering, and we may still experience those grief bursts as well. So again, just to reiterate that not only are some of these continuing bonds behaviors normal, but they actually help us to cope with our grief too. And encouraging others in your life too, and sharing this light of this continuing bond theory with others. Again, this helps normalize what you're experiencing and going through, and again, can help you feel a little bit less crazy. So just some more examples of continuing bonds. We've talked about a few of these together, and a lot of these mourning practices and rituals and continuing bonds examples, there are lots of overlaps, and it all just depends on the angle and the light that you're looking at them. But again, they're all healthy and they're all normal, and they're all unique to you and your family or your kids. So We talked about talking to the person. This may be, out loud. This might be in our heads. This might be in dreams. Writing letters, reading over text communications or emails. These are all really normal and healthy ways to remember that relationship that you had with them and continue on. You can continue these conversations and come back to them, keeping photos around and looking at photos or memory books. Imagining what advice that your person might give you, maybe in a challenging situation, or thinking yourself or encouraging your kids, well, what do you think mom would say? Or what do you think dad would say? Or what did they used to tell you when you were facing the challenge? Maybe there's words of wisdom or just little, notions that they used to go through or say to you that may bring kids or yourself lots of comfort. Often those are ways that we continue their legacy as well and keep their memory and their spirit alive. So we talked about incorporating foods, anything that has to do with senses, maybe music, smells are always a great way of continuing that bond, engaging in your person's favorite activities or hobbies. So this could be, maybe continuing on or building on an activity that you learned with them. Maybe it's, someone was teaching your child to ride their bike, so continuing on with that. Maybe you guys really liked going for family picnics. Maybe it's visiting certain places or going on certain vacations that you had planned or that you hoped on planning. Finishing a project that they were working on in honor of them, in memory of them. I already skipped ahead and talked about the trips. Linking objects, so keeping objects close, or again, just including them. So maybe it's having someone's watch on their bedside, or presenting your children with gifts that remind them or were your person that has died's items. And experiencing, feeling your person's presence. So this may be related to just different symbolic things in the world. So some people talk about dimes being left behind, or messages or signs from someone that has died, or cardinals, and being okay with that and allowing that. Or maybe it's a spirit. Maybe you can literally, or maybe your kids can feel that, or just talking about those experiences and nurturing them and holding them close. Are really important. And again, sometimes there's no words for that. It's just that bond, that presence, and that experience for your children or yourself. So, and there may be lots of other ideas or examples that we're not talking about. So if they come to mind or if they come up, embrace them. Maybe it's talking with other parents that have their children also grieving, or connecting with other family members for other ideas or ways that you could incorporate someone that you have that shared grief with, or just other ideas. So
we have just a few examples on this slide of ways to engage in continuing bonds. So we have a picture of like memorial Christmas tree ornaments. So people taking pictures of the person who has died and kind of creating them into a Christmas tree ornament that you can hang on your Christmas tree if you celebrate Christmas. There's also another memorial ornament with it's like a feather inside of it and a nice saying on the outside. The top picture is an example of having a plate of food. I believe this is a First Nations tradition called a spirit plate, and so you would put a little bit of food on the person who had died's plate, and then afterwards I think put the offering outside as kind of a way to remember and acknowledge it also as an offering to the Creator. These are just, again, some examples of some children's memorial activities that we've done at the hospice. So kind of starting on our far left, we have a Christmas tree ornament activity where children were encouraged to bring a picture of their loved one to the special event. And we put the children's picture of their person inside of the ornament. And then we had lots of other fun stuff that you could also put in, sort of fake snow and glitter and lots of fun stuff that the kids could also put inside. And then obviously we would put a lid on it, and then that was something that they could take home with them and hang on their Christmas tree as a way to remember their person. In the middle, we have a picture of a memorial lantern. This is something that we would typically do at a Mother's Day event or a Father's Day event. So we use LED candles, not the fire ones, but kids can decorate the outside of the memorial lantern with different colored tissue papers, and the different colors can represent either emotions or grief memories or what their grief feels like, or they can just, do whatever they would like with the outside of their jar. And the idea would be that some people, we would talk with the kids about how some people, when they're thinking about their person or they want to remember them, that lighting a candle is a really good ritual. And so this is a lantern that they can, and because the candle is safe, they can engage in that when they are thinking about their special person or talking to their special person. Then they can, light their candle in their memorial lantern. And then we have memorial gingerbread houses. So this would be something that we would do at our family holiday event in December, where families are each given a gingerbread house kit to decorate. And we also provide little sheets of paper and pens and pencils. And before the family decorates the gingerbread house together, we encourage them to write messages to their person who has died and place them inside of the gingerbread house. And so we find that it's a great kind of conversation opportunity for the family, and then they get to engage in that activity together, which is decorating the gingerbread house. So we're coming to the end of today. Today's a little bit shorter, and talking about teachable moments. This is where we kind of take everything that we've discussed today and talk about how you can take this information and real world practically apply it to, your life with your child or your youth. So what we would encourage you to do is talk with your child about what you learned today. So if your child is engaging in a group with us right now, it might be that you've set up this time where they tell you about what they've done in group and you tell them what you've learned in group. Or maybe it's just you who is watching this series kind of on your own, and you can share, this is what you learned today. So talk with your child or your youth about ways you might memorialize your loved one. So, what are some ways that we can remember so-and-so? And include, obviously, the child or the youth in kind of that brainstorming process and making those decisions. And see if you can come up with, we would call it like a continuing bonds plan or a memorialization plan for the next few months, or even like maybe even the rest of the year. So kind of be thinking about what are going to be the big moments for us? Is it Mother's Day? Is it the person's birthday? Is it our birthdays? It's different for every family. So if you kind of go through and think of, these are all of the kind of big points for the rest of the year, the next few months, and then kind of go through each one and talk about what would be something that we could do to remember your person on that day. And again, it doesn't have to be really elaborate and doesn't have to take a lot of planning. Sometimes I think just having these conversations is a lot, right? It's great to talk about these things ahead of time. And it might just be kind of taking some time, some quiet time on the day of, whether it's the anniversary or the birthday or whatever, and just spending time as a family. You could be playing a game that you always used to play. Really, the options are endless, and and kids, I think, are really great to involve in these kinds of conversations because they're so creative and they just come up with the greatest options and ideas. And then you kind of have your continuing bonds plan for the next little bit. And again, you're including your kid in that, so then they feel really good about being able to make decisions and be a part of that planning process. And then the only thing left to do would be to kind of carry through with that plan. So we'll just end today with a quote that says, "The greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them." And we really believe that the tools that we've been talking about today, continuing bonds, rituals, mourning, will be helpful to you and your family and your children. I think that kind of one of the things that we talked about in earlier webinars was this idea that we as parents or as adults, we want to protect kids. And it's that idea that, we can't really protect them, but it's about preparing them and being honest with them and giving them the tools to deal with what life has to offer them. So we will end there for today. These are our references in case anybody would like to see them. Again, if you have any questions or any feedback for us, we would love to hear it, or we'd love to have a conversation with you. So you can email us, and that email is on the very first slide of our presentation for today. Next time, we're going to be talking about ways that we as adults can be supportive to grieving children and youth. And then we'll kind of be, we're headed, I guess this is like the middle end half of our series, because then we only have one more week after that. So very exciting to be kind of coming into the home stretch here. And we hope that you find today's information really helpful, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. See you next week. Thank you.